Morning, everybody. Yeah. Familiar theme. For those of us, I guess, maybe of a certain generation or a little bit older, that is the Playboy theme, which was a very popular tune and became the theme used for the Playboy television shows and much more, and was actually a single released on the Playboy label. Some of this stuff you might not know. Nick Digilio, by the way, on 720 WGN, live in the Allstate studio. The reason we bring this up is because there's a terrific new book that's out right now called Playboy Swings, How Hugh Hefner and Playboy Changed the Face of Music. It is a terrific book about the history of music associated with Playboy magazine and Playboy Enterprises, and how Hugh Hefner took a personal love of his, which was jazz, and then eventually all kinds of music, and turned it into not only a personal passion of his, but made it exceedingly popular. The book covers all of it. It's called Playboy Swings. The author is Patty Farmer, and she joins us to talk this morning. Hi, Patty.
Hey, Nick. Good morning.
Morning.
I have to tell you.
Yeah.
Every time I hear Playboy Swings, or every time I hear the Playboy theme, it just makes me smile.
Yeah. It's a very cool piece of music. Before we jump into the book and everything, Patty, what's your background? You're a writer. You're a fan. You wrote a book called The Parisian Room Presents, which was about the old days of New York City nightlife. How did you get involved in the fascination with that kind of stuff?
I just love entertainment history. You know, I'm really a historian in that field, and it's people that we're losing every day. You know, we just lost Abe Vigoda, and all these great performers. You mentioned the Persian Room Presents, and gosh, half the people I interviewed in that book are no longer with us. I was the last interview that Andy Williams gave, Patty Page, Polly Bergen, Celeste Holmes. So, it's important to me to be able to archive their thoughts and memories from working in the business, from starting out, from their work ethics.
I want to get into the book. You're mentioning, the older people that we've lost, and a lot of the people that you interviewed passed away. Upon reading your book, I couldn't believe, and we'll get to why he's in the book. I couldn't believe that Irwin Corey was still alive. You know what?
He's not only alive, he is very fresh.
Isn't that unbelievable? For those of you, explain who Professor Irwin Corey is. I love the man, and I thought he had passed away. I really did until I read your book.
No, the professor is still alive, still living independently at 102.
Jeez.
And he was a very, very popular political comic of, many, many decades. At 102, you can imagine.
Yeah.
And Nick, I had said he was very fresh. I went to visit him at his beautiful home in New York quite a few times to get his story. And at 102, I had to say, Irwin, watch the fingers.
Well,
102.
It's just, that's so great to hear. 102 years old, Professor Irwin Corey. Really, really great. Well, anyway, I really enjoyed the book very much, Patty. And
thank you.
I like the fact that, because immediately a lot of people, when they think Playboy, they think naked women and things like that. But the kind of powerful influence that Playboy had, and Hugh Hefner and his vision had on life, is pretty big as in terms of music and culture and literature and breaking boundaries and things like that. Is that one of the reasons why you wanted to write the book?
Definitely. Many people, when you say Playboy, it's for sure not the first thing that pops into their head. People think centerfolds and bunnies. But music was a huge passion of Hefner's, and he really helped advance the art form. Prior to a lot of the attention that Hef gave it, the concerts, the jazz festivals, the 40 clubs around the country, jazz was really a music that you danced to. And Hefner helped bring it to the place where people sat down, that it was a concert music, that they paid money and sat down and listened to the jazz festival. So because it was a passion of his, he included it in everything. You know, that first Playboy magazine in 1953, he could have, you know, written an editorial about anything in the world, you know, about a politician, about a movie star. He had Marilyn Monroe on the cover, and yet for the big article in the magazine, he chose to have an article written about the Dorsey brothers. Mm-hmm. So he was that committed to jazz. He enjoyed it that much. And when he wanted to celebrate 5 years of the magazine, he wanted to throw a big party and started making a list of all his favorite performers that he was going to invite. And, you know, the list was so gigantic, it turned from a 4-hour party into a 3-day jazz festival.
And that 3-day jazz festival took place right here in this city.
That's right.
At the old Chicago Stadium. Let's talk, before we get back into the history and all that stuff, let's talk about that 3-day event. I mean, there's a quote in here that says it was one of the most important jazz events of all time. Is that right?
Right, yes. The 3 most important days of jazz,
yeah.
I believe was the quote, something like that. It was a big deal, you know, and it all happened in Chicago, the magazine, the festivals, the first club. But that jazz festival was important for a lot of reasons. Hefner was one of the first truly colorblind people that, you know, I've had the privilege of meeting. And when I say colorblind, he was just colorblind. You know, he picked the best person to perform, not based on even being an activist or a crusader. He didn't say, I'm going to put a black performer on stage. He just did it. And I think he was always surprised by the fallout, which was numerous. You know, he lost advertisers and sponsors. But for that festival, he integrated both the stages and the audience. And, you know, in 2016, that's, you know, nothing. But in 1959, that was a big deal.
You know, it was a big deal. And the other thing, I want to talk more about the color barrier that you talk about, because it's a big deal. What Hugh Hefner did, mm-hmm. not just in terms of including people of color on the bill at a festival or including them in the magazine, musicians in the magazine, but the way that they were in. It's very special that the way that they were in the TV shows that they did. And I want to get to that, too, because that was a very groundbreaking thing. But let's talk about those 3 days, though. A lot of really amazing things happened. Not only we can talk about the artists, but you were talking about some of the innovations. That was the first time that they had used a revolving stage so that it would cut down on how long people would have to wait between acts, correct?
Right. And that was, you know, as you just said, groundbreaking. You know, everybody had an allotted period of time, and the thought process was that there wasn't any lag time for the audience. They didn't have to wait for the next band to come and set up. So while the one group or performer was singing or performing, the next one would be setting up on the backside of this roundabout. But it also served to keep everything going and keep it, you know, on a nice timeline. But it was very new and very innovative at the time.
Yeah.
And there are some funny stories in the book about, you know, people that said, wow, you know, when you say 45 minutes, it's not a suggestion, you know, because the stage would start moving right.
That's right. It's like, get off the stage because it's moving. Yep. Well, no, originally, though, the initial idea was to have it at Soldier Field. That was the original idea, and it was to tie it into a sporting event that was going to take place on that weekend as well.
Right. But so much pressure from the church, actually. The church put a lot of pressure on city officials, and although they had given their permission and made their deal, they, at the last minute, pulled back their permission. So the Playboy folks were really scrambling to find another venue to have it. And at that time, it was really one person, if you can believe it, one Playboy employee who put together the entire event. Victor Lowndes, who was Hugh Hefner's buddy and second in charge over at Playboy. Nowadays, that would be unheard of. You know, they start a year ahead and have a staff of a couple hundred people to put it together in California at the Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah, and he put it together. And we do want to thank because you know the venue, the Soldier Field venue was off limits to them, but the fantastic Wirtz, the fantastic Wirtz family came to the rescue. Real quickly, tell everybody about who was responsible for letting them do it at the stadium, and also how Wirtz was involved with helping with the clubs as well.
That's right. I was going to bring that up. Mr. Wirtz, you know, had the stadium, you know, as you all know probably, and he made it available and at a very reasonable rate. So the festival went on, and it formed a lasting relationship between the Wirtz family and Playboy. And just a year later, in 1960, when they were looking for a place to open that first Playboy club in Chicago, again, there was an empty building, and Mr. Wirtz came through and let them have it. And Playboy thought they really made a terrific deal, because he said he would just charge them a percentage of what they made. Little did anyone know what a huge success it was going to be. So he made a very smart deal there.
Yeah, the Wirtz family has a history of being smart in the world of business. There's no question about it. Yeah. Patty, hang on, okay?
Okay.
All right, Patty Farmer is with us. The book is called Playboy Swings, a tremendous book, the subtitle of which is How Hugh Hefner and Playboy Changed the Face of Music. Really great stuff. A lot of great pictures in it. We're going to get into more of that with Patty Farmer, the author, coming up right after we take this break on 720 WGN.
I left my heart in San Francisco.
Nice. Nick Digilio here on 720 WGN. All righty then. We're live in the Allstate Studio, 7th floor of the Trib Tower. That, of course, is Tony Bennett. And we're talking about the book Playboy Swings, How Hugh Hefner and Playboy Changed the Face of Music. The author of this terrific book is Patty Farmer, and she joins us to talk more about the world of Playboy and the world of music. Tony Bennett turned out to be a really integral friend and a big part of the success of jazz music and Playboy and on the Playboy TV show as well, right, Patty?
Absolutely. Tony Bennett was one of the, if not the only one of the only performers that I could find who appeared at all of the Playboy showcases. You know, he was in the clubs, at the festival, on the TV shows, wasn't on the record label, but he was definitely a great friend to Playboy. And this was at the height of his career that, you know, he just liked Hef. They were buddies, so he appeared at the clubs and for a lot less than he would normally get for an appearance.
Yeah, there are a lot of great stories in here about him, and I love while I was reading the book, Patty, it made me so want to get those episodes of the Playboy shows that you the Penthouse, the Playboy's Penthouse, and the Playboy After Dark shows. The one that you describe where he's kind of improvising and dancing. Improvising and dancing. Tell me about that performance in particular, because it sounds like he was just having an amazing time.
You know, that was the whole premise of the show. When the network offered Hef his own show, I think they had in mind something along the lines of Ed Sullivan, where, you know, he would be at a desk and have people come out and tell jokes or sing, and then maybe sit on the couch and talk for a while. But Hefner had a different idea. He wanted it to be more intimate and in like a home setting. So hence Playboy's Penthouse. The elevator's open and you walk into supposedly Hugh Hefner's living room. And, people are just milling about. So this particular episode, Tony Bennett was there. And it was an impromptu thing. Hef said, how about, you feel like singing us your new song? And So he did, but he just, danced. There's a little stairway in the penthouse, and you could tell he was just having a great time. And he did definitely improvise. He cracked up in the middle of it, but that did not lessen the excitement in the performance. Yeah. You could tell everybody just had a great, great time. There's another. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say there is another episode similar to that with Sammy Davis, and Hefner even gave him a puppy at the end of the show. But it was improvised, and they had a lot of different times in there. Sometimes they filmed in the morning or the afternoon, but it was all great music. Cy Coleman and Ella Fitzgerald was popping into the show. Really great.
They just popped in, and it's amazing. Well, before we jump into the TV side of it and talk a little bit about that and some of the musicians in that regard, that first those the biggest 3 days in jazz. Can you just rattle off? Can you just rattle off some of the artists who appeared at the Playboy Jazz Fest that first year? Because it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
It was every great jazz performer of that time. It was Ella Fitzgerald, Stan Keaton, Duke Ellington, Count Basie and his orchestra came. It just on and on. The only one on the Hef's wish list that didn't show up was Frank Sinatra.
Right, but I want you to tell the story real quickly. Frank did show up, kind of.
Well, some of the Chicago papers actually the next day reported that Frank Sinatra was at the Playboy Jazz Festival, and it was really Duke Hazlett, another Chicago son. Duke was a Sinatra impersonator, or he looked like Frank, and he was a friend of Hefner's from going around to the different Chicago clubs during at that time. So Frank couldn't appear, and Hef asked Duke, he said, this situation, would you like to come? And the night of the performance, I forget who was in front of him, but all of a sudden the spotlights start flaring in the sky, and the helicopters even started going. They made a big fanfare of it. And in the distance, you could see, this guy with a raincoat thrown over his shoulder, a hat cocked, police escort, and the Count Basie Orchestra started playing Come Fly With Me, and he jumped on stage and started singing. And even though Mort Saul, who was MC at the end of the performance, did say, it was Duke Hazlett, as I said, the next day there was at least one Chicago paper that didn't get that part, that just said Frank Sinatra was with us.
Yeah.
And actually, when Mort announced that it was Duke, the audience didn't believe it. They booed him.
Right.
So
it's funny.
It's something.
Oh, no, that's a great story. It's a terrific story. It's also great for Duke because he was like, wow, I must have really been great if people were absolutely convinced I was Sinatra.
Absolutely. He went on, to a lot of fame. He was on every single TV show, and Steve Allen and Johnny Carson. He had quite a career, and he's still with us, and had a lot of stories to talk about those days.
Who were some of your favorite interviews in the writing of the book?
It was just such a unbelievable moment for me to sit there with Sonny Rollins and Ramsey Lewis and Ellis Marsalis and John Hendricks, all these great, great musicians, and actually have them tell me what it was like. And that's what I enjoy about writing. Of course, it's a lot of history, a lot of real deep facts, what went on in the country, what went on in Playboy, but then to kind of take a step back and let Ramsey Lewis or Al Jarreau tell me what it was like to play at the Playboy clubs. Al Jarreau at that time was part of a duo. It was Al and Julio. And to have, this great Grammy winner sitting there telling me, how great it was for him to play at the Playboy clubs and for them to have a venue for him to perform at and get good at and work at playing in front of an audience. that was the fun for me.
The Playboy embraced jazz right out of the gate, as you said. And I really love the little detail that you put in, like all of the headings in the table of contents were generic, but there wasn't a music heading. It was specifically jazz, and Hefner went out of his way to not make it generic, but to specify jazz, and that was how passionate he was about it.
Right, and I don't think it was that conscious, because after the book came out, and Hef and some of the Playboy folks read that, they said, "Yeah, isn't that interesting? That Hef, because at that time." You say Playboy, but it was really Hef was in charge of everything.
Right.
And music meant jazz to Hef.
Yeah.
So that was the heading, yeah.
And the Playboy, the yearly, roundup, the poll at the end of the year became enormously popular. Tell us a little bit about that in the magazine.
It was the All-Star Jazz Poll, and it was a questionnaire that Playboy put out to its subscribers, asking them, to put together their dream band, if you would. Who's your favorite vocalist, who's your favorite guitarist, saxophonist, and the subscribers would vote and send in their votes. And every year it was widely anticipated, and it was a really big deal. And a few years later, they even expanded it to make the All-Star Jazz Poll, where they went to the winners. Actually, they went to Stan Keaton and they went to Count Basie, and they say, "Who's your favorite?" So it was very interactive, and just a huge participation back in the day when people couldn't just go to their computer and click on, who their favorite was. They actually had to fill out the form and put a stamp on the envelope and mail it in.
And it added that kind of thing. Added a real sense of legitimacy to a magazine that could have just been, thought of as a dirty magazine with a bunch of naked ladies in it. You know what I mean? Like, it added a real cultural literacy to it.
It absolutely did. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head right there, Nick.
Yeah. Okay, Patty, hang on, okay?
Sure.
Okay, Patty Farmer is with us. She's the author of a terrific new book called Playboy Swings. It's all about how Hugh Hefner and Playboy changed the face of music, and it did. It did. And we're going to talk, when we come back after the break, we're going to talk about the TV series, the two TV series that also broke a lot of ground and exposed a lot of people to great musicians and great artists. Playboy Swings is the name of the book. We'll talk more about it after we take this break here on 720 WGN. All right. Good morning, everybody. Yeah. Nick Digilio here on 720 WGN. We are live in the Allstate Studios on the 7th floor of the Trib Tower. Duke Ellington's Take the A Train. We're talking with Patty Farmer, who's the author of a terrific book called Playboy Swings. It's all about how Hugh Hefner and Playboy changed the face of music. A terrific read, lots of fun, really informative, well-researched, and beautifully written. We welcome Patty back to the show. Patty, welcome back.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay, let's talk about the TV show. We briefly mentioned it earlier. It started out as Playboy's Penthouse, and the idea was that Hef wanted it to be different from your regular talk show. And one of the innovative things that they did was inspired by the show You Were There. You Are There. Mm-hmm. And it was a subjective point of view, like the camera was you, and you were walking through the party, and you were part of it. And that really changed, the way that people looked at TV variety shows, correct?
Absolutely. It definitely did. You felt like you were actually at the party, and you felt really happy to be there, too, with all these great friends of Hef's that showed up.
And, we touched on it really early, but I really want to get into this now for how big a deal it was for Hefner, even, and it was not a conscious thing, but how he pretty much subconsciously just kind of changed the color barrier. Like would have people of color and artists of color, musicians of color on the show, and not just on the show, but sitting around and talking. You have this great story, Patty, in the book about Dick Gregory and his experience with Jack Parr. Can you tell that story for us?
Yes. Dick Gregory was, he credits Hefner for breaking the color barrier. Dick got his star on the Walk of Fame last year, and the first thing out of his mouth was, I thank Hugh Hefner because I don't think I would be here if it wasn't for Hef giving me a chance at the Playboy Club. And Dick Gregory was booked to perform in front of a white audience, at the Chicago Playboy Club. And it was actually a mistake because while Playboy was all about integration, they weren't really about causing major, upheavals. So, but that night, Dick Gregory came out in front of this all-white Southern group of meat packers, I think it was, or frozen food guys. That's what it was. Some guys that were in town for a frozen food convention. And, they were shocked, and they even said to Dick, who was on the stage, they said, we're from the South, and we're from Alabama. And Dick said, I spent a couple years there one night. And anyway, he broke the ice. He had them laughing. And Victor Lowndes, who I had mentioned was Hef's second in charge, saw this, interaction. It was just wonderful. And he ran over to the mansion to get Hef. And by the time Hef got back, Dick was still on stage and still performing and still had the audience, begging for more. It had been about 4 hours. Well, that led to an article in Time magazine, and Jack Parr read it, called up Dick, and asked him to be on his show. And let me back up a little bit. Prior to this, Billy Eckstein had told Dick Gregory that you don't want to really be on any of the TV shows. They're white TV shows. All they want you to do is come out and perform and go away. So now Jack Parr's folks have called Dick, and it's his dream to be on the Jack Parr show, but he remembered what Billy Eckstein told him, and he said, no, I can't do it. And he told me, it was very moving. He said, I hung up the phone and I cried. He said, it was my dream, but I just couldn't do it. And about an hour later, the phone rang, and he answered the phone, and this time it was Jack himself, and he said, Mr. Gregory, I know a lot of people are probably calling you, and you probably think this is a hoax, but this is Jack Parr, and I'd love to have you on the show. And Dick said, I can't do it. And Jack said, well, why not? And he said, because you don't let black people sit on your couch. And I think Jack was even taken back, and he said, well, if you come on my show tonight, I'll let you sit on the couch. It's, I hadn't thought of it. And so he did. He was on the Jack Parr show, and he was one of the first black performers to sit and chat afterwards on the couch with Jack Parr, and it catapulted him really to stardom and financial security.
It's an amazing story. It is. But then that makes you think even more how groundbreaking the Playboy's penthouse was, because Hefner didn't even think of that. They were all sitting together. They were like near a piano, or they were on a couch, or they were sitting in chairs and just chatting. You talk about like Ella Fitzgerald just walks in and begins talking at one point. She seems a little uncomfortable because she's not performing.
Right, and I don't want to give away everything from the book, but
right. I'm sorry, I like the book a lot, Patty, and I was just excited. So
am I. You can tell I love talking about it.
Yeah.
There's a really telling story that I included about Nat King Cole.
Yes.
And this particular night, Nat came to visit Hef at the penthouse, and he did not sing. He chatted with Hef about what was going on, about an upcoming record. And then he sat, since couches are big in this story. But anyway, He sat on the couch and talked to an author, Rona Jaffe. And, again, what's the big deal about that? Well, again, it was in 1959. And to have a black performer sit on the couch with a white woman and chat about literature, it was explosive.
Absolutely.
And Hefner lost a lot of Southern advertisers because of that, and he lost a lot of Southern networks that carried the show just because of that. Yeah.
Well, listen,
but, that was his commitment.
Patty, it's a great book. I mean, it really is. As you can tell, I'm very enthusiastic about it. And I do want to mention the fantastic pictures. Is there anybody that you'd like to acknowledge for so many great, wonderful pictures throughout the book?
There are so many fun photos in there, but there are a lot that you wouldn't have guessed. Alfred Hitchcock having lunch at the Playboy Club, just things like that. Jerry Van Dyke, Dick Van Dyke, a lot of great performers, a lot of great stories. A lot of people got their starts there. If I can't even pick, I can't even remember all my photographs.
Yeah.
I know there are about 50. My publisher was complaining, telling me I had to pull out some photographs, and I really stood my ground. So there are a lot of photographs in there that are just great.
It adds a lot. It adds a lot to the book. It adds a lot of pleasure to the book, too. And it's a very thorough book. It's beautifully researched, Patty. And anybody who wants to know the history of music associated with Playboy, it's all in here, all of it. And it is really wonderfully written and very entertaining, and I learned a lot while I was reading it. A terrific book, Patty. Congratulations, and thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much. And I love your station. I listen to it when I'm in Chicago as much as I can.
I appreciate that. Okay, Patty, thanks very much.
Take care.
Okay, take care. There's Patty Farmer, the author of Playboy Swings, How Hugh Hefner and Playboy Changed the Face of Music. Very, very entertaining and really wonderfully written book. I thought it was great. All right, and you should pick it up. By the way, her website is Patty, that's with a Y, patty-farmer.com. Patty with a Y, patty-farmer.com. But we have a link on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Nick D Show. All right, we'll take a break. Nick Digilio here on 720 WGN.